They didn't put me on the list, but I'm just going to start off with a couple slides and then turn it over to the experts. Good, it worked. That's good. You see our agenda for tonight? This is a big one. This is the personnel budget, which is roughly 75% of our total budget for next year. Our goals remain the same as they have, well, really over the last 3 years, which is to offer the best, most comprehensive education we can possibly offer for our kids within the scope of the community's financial ability to pay for it. We do so by continuing to align laser-like on the most essential aspects that we need to spend the money on, try to save money as much as possible, maximize every dollar spent, and most importantly, be transparent as possible. So 3 slides I'm going to do, then turn it over. The first is, what is our financial landscape currently? So you've heard us talk about our struggles with the growing gap between expenditures and revenue. Those continue to grow. You can see our projected gap in 26 and 27 is significantly greater than this past year's gap. That's because our actual expenses are going up close to 7%. While our projected revenue, is going up only 3.38%. So that leaves a shortfall of over $7 million, actually $7,658,869. The main culprits in this are the expenses, especially healthcare, utilities, and in some cases, BOCE's expenses. But for example, our healthcare costs are going up close to 15% next year. That makes up that increases 87% of our total revenue we're getting from state aid and taxes next year. So we're eating up 87% of our revenue increase for next year, just healthcare cost increases alone. That's a challenge to bridge that gap while protecting student programs and existing staff. And that's the good news. So our commitment to 26-27 is we are not going to reduce any student programming. We are not laying off any staff or teachers. We're going to maintain the established class size parameters, and Christine and Dave are going to talk about the specifics in a second around that. And we're going to do whatever we can not to have to spend any of our limited reserves when that happens. That's a result, however, the reason we're able to do this is because of the great work of the leadership of the board and Christine to create a contingency amount at the end of this year of around $7 million that's going to cover the $7 million, or most of the $7,658,000. So because of that contingency at the end of this year, we're able to cover the gap for next year. But that gap and that contingency numbers are starting to become equal, and the next phase of that is the scary one where the gap is bigger than the contingency. So we definitely have some work to do in the future, but I am extremely hopeful of this work. It starts with the advocacy of this Board of Education and collaboration across our entire community, including Mr. Modleski, the president of the VTA, who's been a huge advocate in collaborating with us around state legislation to get more state aid. It's about innovation. We talked about the community partner work. That's just one piece of it. We have to be innovative in trying to find ways to share expenses, save expenses in things like health care, work with the state and the United States government around health care costs, and do other things to just look outside the box to try to save money as well as gain revenue beyond taxes and state aid. Certainly efficiencies, that's not a bad word. That doesn't mean, I want to be clear, efficiencies doesn't mean we're cutting programs or people. Efficiencies mean we're optimizing our current practice as much as possible to spend the money on the most essential aspects because we have a finite amount of money. Obviously, the goal is going to be to move from short-term fixes to long-term financial health. And again, with the expertise around us, I feel like that is a definite win-win and that we can accomplish that. So that's the big picture. We'll definitely talk more about the big picture as we move through the next few months, but I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Dave, who are going to talk about the specific personnel budget moving into next year.
So good evening. Tonight we are diving deeper into the personnel side of our budget for the 26-27 school year. As we navigate this structural deficit, we must bridge the gap while protecting our student programs and our existing workforce. This will work for me eventually. Thank you. So tonight's presentation will outline how we're going to use strategic attrition, efficiencies, and targeted reinvestment without compromising our existing programs. All right. We are currently looking at the total projected enrollment for next year, projected at 4,016 students, which is a slight net decrease of about 10 students compared to the current year. The primary shifts are happening at the elementary level, where we're projecting a decrease of 64 total students across grades K through 6. We've added another component to our kindergarten projections, including information from the Department of Health, utilizing live birth data. Live birth data shows a decrease in 19 live births from this year to next year. However, our trends over the last 5 years have been pretty similar. So we are projecting at the higher end at 287 to ensure that we are prepared. These are average class sizes that Tim went through, and despite the financial challenges, we're remaining committed to these established class size parameters. We may be leaning towards the upper end in some of those, but we want to maximize efficiency and not while ensuring that we do not exceed them. Because K-6 enrollment is decreasing, and we'll be leaning into our established class size parameters, we will align our staffing through strategic attrition, meaning we are capturing savings when staff members retire, transfer, or leave the district rather than layoffs. You'll notice that we're not increasing our core staffing at the junior high, despite a bubble that's been kind of going through. And the reason for that is the complexity of the secondary scheduling and the room to absorb students. So if you have 195 students across 10 sections, you're averaging 19.5 per class. Now you've increased by 30 students, so you're at 225. You're now at 22.5 per class, which is still allows us to be under that 25 student target. This efficiency allows us to move resources into high-impact areas where there is a growing need in specials or encore areas and foreign language at the junior high. Class size comparisons. This table shows that with our efficiency efforts, we're still able to remain within the class size parameters. At K-6, you're seeing an average of 18 to 19 students in K-2, 21 to 22 in 3-6, so it's moving from 21 to 22, and these are all based on averages. The actual average K-6 is about 0.8. And sorry, I just lost where it was. Okay. We're also identifying the increases at 7-8 and 9-12 from 20 in core classes to 22, specifically pulling out core classes because electives can vary so much. So we thought it was important to really highlight what the averages are in those core sections, English, math, science, social studies, and foreign language. All right. So the efficiencies. Through this attrition that was mentioned earlier, retirement, resignation, transfer, we're identifying efficiency of 8.0 elementary general education teachers. And we're also identifying one secondary science teacher position through attrition. We are continuously evaluating other areas as well. Again, we do have to invest in those high impact areas. While core enrollment can be absorbed, we're seeing an increased demand in the specials, encores, and foreign language at the junior high. We're proposing a 0.4 technology and a 0.6 world language increase to meet those scheduling needs. We're also exploring opportunities to share staff between junior and senior high to provide maximum flexibility. And we have a bubble position that we are holding because of the unpredictability of the kindergarten sections. Bottom line, we are realigning our staffing levels to match our current enrollment needs and trends while preserving the integrity of our class size parameters and maintaining all existing student programs. And I'll turn it over to Christine for the rest of the budget presentation.
Good evening. There we go. So moving on to our financial details, we're going to begin with an update to our bus fleet replacement plan. Please note that this slide is just an update from previous presentations. We've revisited these figures with our vendor, resulting in a minor adjustment to the numbers shared earlier. So specifically, we intend to finance for this round of our vehicle replacement cycle. It's increased by about $7,000 to $1,566,837. In previous presentations, we've shared segments of our planned expenditures. This slide represents a comprehensive roll-up of projected expenditures across all of our budget lines. Our total proposed 26-27 budget stands at this time at $117,360,097, which is a 6.91% increase over the current year. The primary drivers of this increase are in some of our non-discretionary lines. Fringe benefits account for about 29, which is the third line there, 29.7% of our overall expenditure budget. That is going up 10.72%, adding $3.37 million to our costs. This is largely driven, as Dr. Terranova had mentioned, by a 15.19% increase in our health insurance costs, which is about $3.1 million. Other benefits aren't increasing as much. That's why we have a net of 10.72%. There's actually our teacher retirement system rate is going down by a percentage, which was a nice, a welcome savings for us. Salaries account for about $70 million of our budget, or 63%. As David noted earlier, our 2.52% increase in instructional salary does reflect the savings realized through this strategic attrition. We are currently analyzing the non-instructional salary line. I know that looks like it's going up 8.37%. I think there's some anomalies in there that we are going to revisit on that, and we'll find some savings. But I do know that some of the drivers to that figure is overtime due to staffing shortages in some of our departments, specifically transportation. BOCES accounts for about services account for about 8.66%. That's the third budget line from the bottom. That's 8.66% of our total budget. That had the next highest increase of about 13.69%, or $1.22 million. The BOCES costs, that still remains a preliminary figure. We're waiting on numbers from Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES to come in later this month, so we'll be able to lock that down a little tighter and have a little better understanding of that. This line includes administrative services through BOCES, our data processing and technology purchases, along with special ed placements and occupational educational costs. Notably in that line, part of that increase is about $308,000 of that is for the newly developed Early College Access, COSER. It's run through BOCES. Running the costs through BOCES, as you know, provides aid to us. So what these are our students that are taking courses through FLCC and MCC. Some of those courses are taught at FLCC, but some of them are taught here by our own teachers. By transitioning this cost to a BOCES line, that enables us to get aid on those salaries that we're already spending money on. So this is a new item in our budget for next year. It's actually, we're going to experience the first expense this year. It wasn't budgeted this year, but next year we will have aid coming in for those expenses. So we're still working out the final details on it. But in short, you know, if we do spend the full $308,000, I don't know that that's exactly where we'll end up. That would generate roughly $190,000 in aid for the district. So again, strategically trying to maximize our aid for expenditures that we're either already incurring or need to incur. Tuition, that's another line that had a big jump. That's the rising costs of specialized placements. And then again, the other line down at the bottom that, you know, it looks like a 50% increase, that's that interfund transfer. That's a $100,000 capital outlay project. That's just where it's classified. That $100,000 was previously in our BOCES line for a project that we had done through BOCES, and we got BOCES aid on that. When we look at our revenue streams, we see a total increase of, on the blue line, of $3.5 million or 3.38% from the prior year. While we project 4.29, the first line there is an increase in our tax levy, generating $2.59 million in new local revenue. Our state sources grew by 2.61%, which is about halfway down the slide. When you weigh these available revenues, though, against our $117 million increase in expenditures from the previous slide, we're facing an initial budget revenue shortfall, as Dr. Terranova had mentioned, of $7.6 million. Just to put this, these numbers in perspective, this chart shows a visual comparison of our new revenue, the green bar there, of $3.5 million against the cost increases, our health insurance in the yellow bar, and our projected budget deficit, the red bar. So as you can see, our total projected revenue increase from all sources is $3.5 million, and our health insurance increase is 3.1, which is 87% of our total new revenue being consumed by just one expenditure line. So this kind of visualizes that core challenge that Dr. Terranova had mentioned earlier, that where our revenue growth is not keeping pace with even our non-discretionary expense line item growth. This is creating a growing structural deficit. It's going to require us to move away from short-term fixes and look at long-term sustainability. So as you know, we've talked about this before, you really have three ways to fill a budget gap. You can raise revenue, lower expenses, or use fund balance or reserves. To raise revenue, we face a few challenges. Here we are constrained by our tax cap formula and state aid formulas, where a 1% foundation aid increase only yields us $271,000. So to fill a $7.6 million budget gap with state aid, they'd have to have a 28% increase in foundation aid. If we, we're also restricted by the tax cap. We simply can't tax our way out of a situation like that. So if we were to raise the tax levy by nearly we would have to raise it by nearly 13% to be able to cover a budget gap such as this. The other option is to reduce expenditures, which that's very difficult to do, given that 76% of our budget is personnel-related costs and subject to contractual obligations and health insurance market volatility. The other option is to utilize fund balance and reserves. This year, we appropriated $3.6 million of last year's year-end fund balance to cover the 25-26 budget gap. At this point in the 25-26 year, based on current projections, we expect to have between 6.8 to 7 million available at the close of the school year to help balance the 26-27 budget. This is really due to our built-in contingencies. However, I must emphasize that this is very likely the last year that we're going to be able to adopt that strategy, at least to this extent. This is kind of taking a look at the health of our reserves. We reviewed this back in December, but it's critical context when discussing a deficit of this magnitude. Our total reserves, both capital and operating, at the end of 2025 school year stands at $10.1 million. This table, you've seen this before, just provides a multi-year data behind that chart that you just saw. So rather than focusing on any single line, I'm going to highlight the overall trend in our operating revenues on the next slide. So these are our reserves excluding capital. So this really, when you're looking at that, this is our safety net, the restricted accounts that we maintain that shield our operations from sudden spikes in mandatory costs, such as pension costs, workers' compensation costs, increases, or unemployment. We refer to these as our operating reserves. They are our reserves balances excluding our capital reserve. This right now stands at about $6.8 million, or 6% of our overall budget. So if you're doing the math in your head, I want to leave you with a very cautionary note. Our total operating safety net of $6.8 million is now actually less than our projected $7.6 million budget gap for next year. This underscores that our accumulated savings can no longer bridge the structural gap created by our rising non-discretionary costs. Our focus remains going forward on monitoring the state budget and identifying further efficiencies. We will provide another budget update on March 26th. So our final milestones for the budget this year include Thursday, April 16th, where the board adopts the 26-27 budget. May 5th is our budget hearing and meet the candidates night. May 19th is our budget vote and Board of Education election. At this time, we'll welcome any questions that you may have.
I have a question. I think it's a Dave question, not a Christine question, I think. So looking at the slides with the efficiencies and the reinvesting high impact areas. So looking at the 9 positions on the efficiencies slide, 8 elementary gen ed teachers, 1 secondary science teacher. The next slide shows a 0.4 and a 0.6. In like the math of this position, of those 2 positions, is that equivalent to like a 1.0 full-time in terms of like benefits, salary, or not really, because they're like the 0.6 and the 0.4 together make a full-time position? I know it's different disciplines and it can't be the same person, but does it, in terms of like salaries and benefits for those 2 individuals, does it really shake out to be like a 1.0 position?
It can be. It kind of depends on how we fill it and what that looks like.
Okay. And so then the positions for the reinvesting high impact areas, that's considered separate from the 9 efficiencies up above. Like those 2 positions, the 2 part-time positions and the full-time position from that slide doesn't cancel anything out in the slide above.
It depends how you look at it.
Okay.
So you could look at it as an efficiency of a total 9, but the adding in of the 0.4 and the 0.6, you can look at it as canceling out to 8.
Okay. And then my final question, I'm not necessarily advocating for this, just a curiosity of practice in the district currently. Is teacher overages a practice at all? So if there's like a full-time teacher, but their load is over their 1.0 appointment, does that the thing that we do here at all? I'm not saying that we should, but like, let's say that there's an art teacher who takes on additional sections over what their contract is. Is that ever been done, and do we do that?
Yes, we do that at both the junior high and senior high pretty consistently, and you'll see some contractual additional pay associated with that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
One quickie, what was included in fringe benefits other than healthcare?
So the employee retirement system, which is your non-instructional salaries, based on your non-instructional salaries, that rate did go up a little bit this year. The teacher retirement system, that rate did go down. That would be our workers' comp insurance premium, which actually went down a little bit, and unemployment expenses. Boy, I had to have the list back in my laptop, but
That's good.
yeah, it's non-instruction, not other employment costs. One bright side too is dental insurance didn't go up. That stayed flat. So those types of other fringe benefits.
What are the number of employees we have right now roughly? Does anybody know off the top of their head? Total employees for the district?
Are we about 800?
Something like that.
I think we're about 530 in instructional staff and about 800 overall.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that includes part-time. I'm not the personnel person,
I
but
can get it back.
we can get you that information.
For the just, I think for clarity, I think I understand it, but for everyone, for the overloads, for lack of a better expression, those are one opt-in, correct? Teacher overloads?
Yeah, teachers
Those
taking
are
on
opt-in.
other positions, as far as I would know, that opt-in, not sometime, not always.
Not always opt-in?
Okay.
Right, but so contractually, though, does the teacher have the ability to turn that back? In other words, we need someone to take an overload, and you have 3 teachers. Does it just get assigned to a faculty member, or does the faculty member have the ability to say, actually, no, I don't want to do an overload this year, and then we move on to another?
Since I am still learning some of the aspects being kind of new, I would like to defer to our high school and junior high.
So contractually, we can assign up to what we call 6 sections at the high school or secondary level. So teachers don't always have the opportunity to be able to decline it because of student need. And they do get compensated on top of what their salary is for that overage. We make every effort that we can to not have overages, and we have made a lot of progress. I think Mike will attest to that in recent years in some departments. Mm-hmm. It's not perfect, but at the same time, we are cognizant of it, but there are some times where we just can't, we don't have wiggle room, and we have to have those overages.
Right. Well, and to that point, too, you're going to have more wiggle room if there's an overage in English versus an elective. If there's overages in electives, do we end up going overage, or do we just end up saying, hey, we're going to have to close off the class list because we want to maintain responsible class sizes?
We try not to turn students away.
Right.
Okay, and we have a variety of electives and programs now where very often I don't think we've used a cap for a program or a class in years, to be honest with you, because there is variety for students. Where we start to see some of the issues is particularly in science and special education. Those are the 2 departments where we have quite a bit of overage.
Okay. And then, thank you very much for that piece. And then on the efficiency standpoint, would overloads be considered efficiencies versus if you took all those overloads and hired 1.0 FTE or 0.6 FTE? Is it an efficiency to do the overloads financially for the district with the faculty rather than?
Financially, yes.
Okay,
Yeah. We haven't necessarily explored expanding, though.
right.
One of the challenges is the.
Thank you. That's answered.
With the overages, it's mainly because if we can't find a .2 science teacher or a .3 some other teacher, it's difficult to find somebody. And, but, you know, Mike and I have talked, it's not great for most teachers to teach that many sections. So it's not something that we're actively looking at to try to save money in any way. It's really something that we try to minimize as much as we can. But one of the challenges we continue to work together on is trying to find part-time teachers who are willing to come in for an hour to 2 hours a day and teach, because that's where the chunks of time are.
Is it more financially beneficial with the overages because you don't have like the benefits piece on top of it? It's extra salary, but there's not extra money beyond extra salary being paid to those staff members?
Yeah, correct. If you're bringing on additional full staff for that, you're paying the health insurance, all the benefits, fringe benefits that come with it, and that will inevitably cost more, yes.
Okay. Would we be able to see what the overages are currently? I'm curious about this.
Of course.
Thank you.
We can get that.
And then one other follow-up question that we can't answer right here, but I'd be interested, Dr. Terranova, if it's possible in the future to survey those faculty and staff members who over the past 5 years have generously, been a part of the overloads. And we got some great data earlier on as far as our faculty staff survey and basically quality of life in the district, and that was all improving from the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Mr. Gee, did you give that one? The one about the survey of our faculty staff? Were you involved in that group for some reason? Maybe not. But it was all good stuff about how people are in a much better place from a faculty staff standpoint than they were the year prior or the year. So those things are all going in the right direction. I'd be interested in what's that subset look like of the folks who have been.
I think Mike has that information already, probably.
That's what I'm saying. May have it. I don't.
I think, again, he can correct, well, not during this meeting, but he can correct me later. I just think I can't speak for all. There are some teachers that are fine with it. There are many teachers who struggle with it.
Right.
And they struggle. So I can tell you the morale of if we increase the number of teachers teaching overages, is not going to be helpful to the morale of the staff.
Oh, no, I agree with that. The genesis for my question is a follow-up for those folks who are doing the overloads. Is there something else beyond the financial piece as far as their quality of life, just to make sure we're keeping eyes on them and making sure that they are feeling fully supported?
I think one of the challenges is just the time. The time is huge. It's more time, and it's very difficult to alleviate the stress of having to teach that many sections when, if you didn't, you'd have that time back. So, but there's certainly ways we can look at it.
Thank you, everybody who just answered all that.
I have one final question about this, and I'll turn my mic off. Is there any consideration with teachers who may not have earned tenure yet in taking an overage? So do we have non-tenured teachers taking any overages? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
I just want to not gloss over a point earlier in the presentation, personnel-wise, the average class sizes. I know it's only a little bit higher, but I lived the years of 25, and I don't want to go back to that. 18 in a kindergarten is awesome. 20 is not. So, I just want us to all be mindful of I realize the efficiencies and, we're tightening our belt, but that is tightening the belt. It's you don't want it to inch too high. So. Just my,
Yeah, I think we're very committed to making sure that happens.
Anything else? I do want to say a quick thank you to Christine. Since you've joined the district, the number of times I've seen us maximize aid in different ways has been quite incredible, and you did it again tonight, and those are the types of things we need. We need to find these efficiencies, we need to maximize aid as we're working with our community partners group to look at other revenue sources, but in the meantime, these small little things you're doing are making a great impact, so thank you for continuing to do that.
You're welcome. Anytime I can get something for 30 cents on the dollar, I'll do it.